Hi, I'm Chris from Nerdy Facts, and you're watching Nerdy Opinions, the show that I made so that people on the internet can tell me I'm wrong. Today is going to be a different kind of episode though, because I'm not wrong. Hollywood is the one who is wrong. Them and every science fiction writer that's ever used time travel as a plot device. And this time I can prove it using facts. Nerdy Facts. Today I want to talk about time travel. It's one of Hollywood's favorite plot devices, showing up in obvious franchises like Terminator and Star Trek, as well as less obvious ones like Harry Potter and Game of Thrones. Some of my favorite films feature time travel, and I'm here to say that none of them make sense. Time travel simply cannot work, and not for the reasons you'd think. Let's use the CW's Flash as an example. This also applies to the sister show, Legends of Tomorrow, but the Flash is just way better. So for those of you who may not watch the show, Barry Allen is super fast. So fast even that he can run through time. Now how he can choose where he'll end up is a topic for another video. I genuinely could not tell you. But that's not the issue here. My issue is with Season 3's Savitar plotline. I won't get into his deal because it's insane, but Savitar is a mysterious speedster that Barry needs to learn the identity of. To do this, he decides to go into the future and ask his future self. No problem so far, right? Wrong. This is the fundamental problem with time travel. If you go to the future, you cannot meet your future self because you no longer exist in the timeline. Here, look. This is the current timeline, and this is where Barry leaves the present to go to the future, and this is where he ends up. Now, see this gap between the timelines? He doesn't exist in this period of time. He literally left reality and doesn't appear again until a few years later. He can't meet a future version of himself because he is the only version. To the rest of the world, Barry just died when he left this point in the timeline. They would eventually move on, and then years later, when he suddenly reappears, expecting to see his future self, all he would find is his loved ones in complete shock of his existence. Now, one could argue that the reason he could go to the future and meet himself is because he already intended to go back to the present, thus ensuring that he'd be there to grow older. But that only works if the future is fixed. Funny enough, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure handles this pretty well. In a fixed timeline, everything that has or will happen always has and always will happen, which is why Bill just needed to plan on setting up a trash can on the roof for one to appear.
Remember a trash can?
Trash can? What are you talking about?
So in The Flash, this would mean that Barry was meant to travel to the future, and so he was meant to travel back to the present. Time therefore cannot be changed. But if time can be changed, then this means there's a chance that Barry won't return from the future. So his existence in the future creates a paradox. We've seen Barry change the future before, so we know the timeline isn't fixed. Now Back to the Future kind of gets away with this. In this universe, time is shown to change slowly. Whenever something happens that couldn't possibly happen, like Marty existing after preventing his own birth, reality adjusts little by little, giving him time to fix the paradox. So in Back to the Future 2, when we see an older Marty McFly existing at the same time as the young one, it's only because reality hasn't caught up to him yet. We can assume that future Marty would disappear slowly if past Marty stayed too long. But Back to the Future is a perfect series. Surely there's nothing I can say that hasn't already been said. Wrong again. This applies to all physical time travel, not just future travel. Now, as long as you don't believe in a flat Earth, which, if you do, please explain it to me in the comments. I'm dying to know how your brain works. But if you're an intelligent person, you know that the Earth is moving. And not just the Earth. So is the solar system and the galaxy it sits in. The whole universe is moving faster than our comprehension. This means that at any point in time, the planet is millions of miles away from where it was at any other point in time. Do you see what I'm getting at? Even if time changes slowly in Back to the Future, the Earth doesn't. The DeLorean is going to get up to 88 miles per hour and shoot into the vacuum of space because it will travel back to a time when the Earth was in a completely different location. This applies to nearly any time travel movie. Take the Terminator, for example. In the future, Skynet decides to send the T-800 back to the 1980s, where he will appear in a parking lot roughly near the location where they sent him from. At least that's the plan. But back in the 1980s, the Earth was trillions of miles away in a completely different part of the universe. So the T-800 is just going to end up floating in space for a few decades until the Earth finally comes back around and pulls it into its gravity, which should be the exact moment from which they sent it back. Imagine that. You send a young, healthy Arnold Schwarzenegger back in time, and 2 seconds later, an older Arnold slams through the roof with the force of a meteor. Of course, that's ridiculous. Obviously, the T-800 would drift from its location over a few decades, but you get my point. Any method of physically sending your body or a machine back in time would displace you in space. Now, the workaround to this is if your time machine does not move and can only send you back or forward to a time when the time machine already exists. One example is yet another comedy, Hot Tub Time Machine. The hot tub can only send them as far back as the 80s because the hot tub didn't exist before that. And they don't get displaced because the hot tub keeps them contained to that location. If the tub itself were traveling, then it would be a problem, but it's not. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the other exception to this rule, which is mind travel. X-Men Days of Future Past shows this off best. Basically, since Wolverine is only traveling backward within his own mind and body, he never has to deal with displacement. The same goes for the wildly underrated British movie called About Time, which is about a man who can go back and revisit any part of his own life whenever he wants. I don't really have anything snarky to say about it, it's just a really good movie and you should check it out if you haven't. So, that's about it. The only realistic time travel movies are X-Men, About Time, and Hot Tub Time Machine of all things. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Nerdy Opinions, and let us know in the comments if you can think of any other time travel stories that actually make sense. I'm sure there's more. Join us next time for when we discuss Hot Tub Time Machine 2. No real topic beyond that, just like, what was the deal with that movie? Did you see it? Not good. Not a good movie.